Hello and welcome everyone to the Alma Thomas Family Program with the National Postal Museum and the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. My name is Maureen Leary, and I am the Youth and Family Programs Manager at the Postal Museum. And just a few notes about the program. It is being recorded, so please be mindful of that if you use the chat feature. We will be posting numerous links in the chat during the program. We will send all of these links out in a follow-up email, so you don't need to keep track of all of them during the program. We have April joining us today to provide American Sign Language interpretation. Author Jean Walker Harvey is also with us. I will introduce her further in a moment.
Hi, I'm Annie. I'm working with Maureen for this program today. I'm a kids program educator from the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. The Hirshhorn is the Smithsonian's National Museum of Modern Art. Hirshhorn Kids believes art is for everyone, regardless of age. I'm so excited to make some art with you guys today.
Well, we are so excited to have all of you with us here today to explore the life and work of an amazing artist. Here you can see a portrait of Alma Thomas, painted by Laura Wheeler Waring in 1945. Alma Thomas was born in Georgia in 1891, and that was about 130 years ago. She moved to Washington, D.C. with her family when she was a teenager, and that's where she lived the rest of her life. Thomas was known for her signature painting style using bright colors and patterns. She spent many years as an art teacher at a school in D.C. and then became a full-time artist late in her life. Born in a time of horse and buggies, she lived through big advancements in technology, like the space race and the moon landing. Her art was inspired both by the nature she saw outside her home studio every day and the awe she felt for the historic exploration of our vast universe. Today, we will learn more about Alma Thomas's life through a children's book, and we will look at examples of her artwork from the Smithsonian collection. And then we will make our own artwork inspired by her process. To get us started, I'd like to introduce Jean Walker Harvey, whose latest book, Ablaze with Color, a story of painter Alma Thomas, just came out last month. Jean is the author of numerous award-winning children's books, including one on artist-architect Maya Lin and artist Romery Bearden. She has been a longtime school group docent at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and a trustee on the board of her local public library. Jean is going to read her book for us, and then we will have a few minutes for questions after the reading. You can submit your questions using the Q&A feature, and we will do our best to get to as many of them as we can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maureen. Ablaze with color. Alma always felt her best when she was outside, soaking up the sparkling colors of nature. In the garden at her house on a hill, she skipped around circles of flowers, pastel purple violets, and crimson roses crowned by bright green banana leaves. She fell back on the grass beneath poplar trees and gazed at quivering yellow leaves that whistled in the wind. Alma waded in the blue hues of a brook and basked in the warm glow of sunsets. Alma was always on the go, never wanting to sit or cook or sew like her three younger sisters. She wanted to make things that she could hold. Alma scooped up moist red clay from the banks of the nearby stream. She shaped small bowls and cups to dry in the sizzling sun. Inside her home, Alma's world was also full of color and creativity. Her mother designed dazzling dresses, singing as she sewed. Her aunts painted petals and patterns, and Alma dipped her brush in tiny pots. Although Alma felt joy at home, she and her sisters were sad that they couldn't attend the school just 2 doors away, the white school, and they couldn't enter museums or the town library. So Alma's parents filled their home with books and created their own place of learning. They invited teachers into their living room to talk about people and places around the world, famous stories and ways of thinking. Even though Alma didn't understand all that was said by the grown-ups, she watched and listened. When Alma turned 15 and couldn't attend the local high school, her family decided to move to the north, away from the injustices of the South. After the train crossed the state border, Alma's mother told her girls to take off their shoes and shake out the Georgia sand and never go back again. The family moved into a house in Washington, D.C., where Alma would live for most of her life. A house with a flower garden, a patch of nature that always made her happy. When Alma grew up, she studied art in college. She chose to share her love of art by teaching at the local school. But even in the nation's capital, schools were still segregated and access to art limited. Alma was determined to bring art to the young in her neighborhood, just as her parents had brought learning into her home when she was young. Alma invited children into her living room and taught them to make wooden marionettes. They performed their own plays when they weren't allowed to see puppet shows downtown. In her free time, Alma painted, studied, and shared ideas with artist friends. Sometimes their work was exhibited together. Mainly, though, she devoted herself to helping children, leading field trips and art clubs, and setting up the city's first gallery in a school. Finally, when Alma was almost 70 years old, she stopped teaching and focused on her own art. Sitting in her favorite red chair, she stared at the patterns of light and color twinkling through the leaves of her holly tree, just as she had watched the fluttering leaves of the poplar trees when she was a young girl. Inspired by what she saw, Alma began painting in a new style: circles and stripes, dashes and dabs, ablaze with color, soft colors, bright colors. She created colors and patterns she remembered from her childhood days in the South and from what she saw at her favorite park nearby. She painted how she felt on the inside when she experienced nature outside, the wind, the sunshine, the flowers, how nature made her heart sing and dance, even when life could be hard and unjust. Alma imagined soaring high in an airplane, even though she had never been in one. Gardens and trees below became streaks and smudges. Amazed by space travel, new at the time, Alma envisioned traveling aboard rockets with astronauts. The starry sky and zooming spaceships glimmered as dashes and swashes. Galleries began showing Alma's new artwork. And then the unexpected happened. The Whitney, a famous museum in New York City, featured Alma's paintings of Earth and space, the first solo show by a Black woman. Thrilled by the honor, Alma greeted crowds gathered at the museum, a place where everyone could visit. Sadly, Alma didn't live to see the momentous day when the first Black president and First Lady chose Alma's painting as the first artwork by a Black woman to be displayed in the White House, the home of the president's family and a symbol of the American people. Alma's art shimmered above a long table in the old family dining room of the White House, where famous leaders, teachers, and artists gathered, just as people had gathered in Alma's childhood home, just as children had gathered in Alma's DC home. In Alma's piece, yellow dashes twirl, circles upon circles swirl, orange, red, purple, blue, a soft, quiet center, a green of nature, a painting of hope and joy, ablaze with glorious color, Alma's colors. The end.
Thank you so much, Jean, for sharing your wonderful book with us. I am looking for questions in the Q&A, and there is still time to submit any questions you might have. And to get us started, I have wondering, Jean, if you can tell us about what inspired you to want to write about Alma Thomas. I know you've written books about other famous people, and it must be hard to choose. There's so many great subjects out there. So what was it that really compelled you to want to explore Alma Thomas's story a bit more?
That's true. There's so many wonderful people to write books about. I am always inspired by creative people and artists, probably in particular, because of my love of art, modern art. And when I learned about Alma Thomas's painting being selected by the White House, I started investigating and learning everything I could about her. I love her art. It truly brings me joy when I see her amazing art and the colors and how she interprets, embodies nature and space.
That's wonderful. And I was fortunate enough to get to see an Alma Thomas exhibit in Washington, D.C. recently. And one thing I learned was that it was really the fact that the Obamas put her painting up in the White House that sort of brought her back to prominence again, that she wasn't quite as well known nationally before that. And so that was an important event that happened. And we are grateful to the Obamas for that.
Yes.
So we do have a couple of questions now in the Q&A. Winnie, age 5, would like to know, what was Alma's favorite color? I don't know if we know the answer to that, but take a stab at it.
That's a great question. I always love that, wondering about colors. I don't know. I do know she loved her red chair. So, that's a pretty unusual color for a chair. So maybe it was red, but I think she loved all bright colors.
She's certainly known for loving bright colors.
Mm-hmm.
Nora is asking, what are you reading now? Maybe
what
she
am
means
I reading now?
Maybe you're
that's
researching
a good
another
question.
person.
You know what? That's exactly what I'm always researching more artists. I'm actually rereading books about the costume designer who made costumes for movies, named Edith Head. So I have a book about her coming out. So it takes me many years to write a book. And so I forget some of the details because it's been so long. So I have to refresh myself, but that's always fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. I bet the research is so interesting to do when you're writing a book. Another question we have in the Q&A, do you have a favorite Alma Thomas painting?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, it probably is Resurrection, which is the one at the White House, because since that is the one that inspired me, but I also love the one at the Hirshhorn that we'll get to see later. So such a special museum.
Great. And we do actually also have a question in the chat from Nadine asking, did Alma Thomas do textile art and fashion? And there was another question I don't want to forget too. Somebody asked, did Alma Thomas have children? And I will go ahead and answer that one. No, she did not. She certainly loved children. She spent many years teaching them, but she never had children of her own. But to get back to that question, do you know anything about that? If Alma Thomas
That's such a good question, since she did do the pots when she was younger, and then the fashion question with her mother being an amazing seamstress designer. I never came across that, but she did make marionettes. She took classes at NYU, and the wonderful connection there with the person who made the big blimps for the New York parade, the Macy's parade, sort of large marionettes. So that was 3D art, but that's all the ones I know of.
Yeah, and I know that she did experiment with her artistic styles as she got older, didn't she? As she started having more difficulties with being able to do some of the things that she had done as a younger artist. And
yeah, she had crippling arthritis in her hands. So, but as we often see with contemporary modern artists, they may start in a very realistic style and then it changes.
Absolutely. And we have a comment in the chat that it's so cool about parade and marionettes. That's some great information that you shared. Thank you. One last question that we will take is from Amy in the chat. What happened to Alma's sisters?
I don't know. I know one of them must have been given or had a lot of her paintings that she donated to museums. So I don't know. That's always so interesting. It's, the sad thing is sometimes it's hard to find about information about
Yes.
people.
And I know what I'm going to be talking about in a moment is a big event that Alma Thomas went to later in her life, the March on Washington. And I know she did do that with at least one of her sisters that was with her for that.
Right. They were very close.
Yes.
Mhm.
And sorry, one last question in the Q&A, and I'm not sure the answer to this. Which park in DC did Alma Thomas frequent to get inspiration for her paintings? I believe she lived on
the Arbor
Street. The National Arboretum?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's such a beautiful place to visit. We are
Yes.
lucky to have that in DC. We have the Botanic Garden too, which is also beautiful. The Arboretum is a huge property that has many, many beautiful plants. And we know she was very much inspired by nature wherever she saw it, outside her window or in places she visited. Yes.
And
go ahead.
Oh, may I just add, the illustrations by Love is Wise are just so incredible. They interpreted and brought out their own style in such an amazing way. So
yes, and I imagine
it's a collaborative effort. It really is.
Yes, and that would be a lot of pressure to be the illustrator on a book about Alma Thomas's paintings when her paintings themselves are just so beautiful.
Yes.
And so well known. Yes. Great. Well, I encourage anyone, if you do continue to think of questions for Jean, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A and she'll be keeping an eye on it and can type some answers in. But thank you so much, Jean, for both sharing your book and sharing all of your knowledge. And we were so appreciative having you with us today to talk about this inspirational artist. So thank you so much. And now I'm going to share my screen again. Here you can see a picture of Alma Thomas, a photograph of her in her studio. And you can find this picture actually at the back of Jean's book. This photo is in black and white, but when I look at it, I like to imagine all the colors that might be there. What colors do you imagine are in this picture? Where do you think those colors are? You can put your answers in the chat if you like. And look at everything that's surrounding her in this picture. There's a lot to see. You can look on the walls. You can think about what might be out the window. You could look at that artwork in front of her. You can see she has so many paints in her workspace, all those tubes of paint in front of her, in front of the painting. And she's using a big brush to make marks on that canvas. So let's see what you all think. What colors are you imagining? Alicia's saying red, greens, blues, shades of white. Yes, pink, yellow, red, all these very bright colors. And we have a comment. I like the dress she has on. I imagine it's yellow and orange and pink. That's something I thought about too. That when I look at this, I picture that dress as also being colorful. Not just the paintings and the paints, but the dress too. Amy says, we are surprised her shirt is not splattered in paint. I know she's not wearing a smock or anything. Maybe she was very confident in her ability to keep it neat. Ariel says sky blue and pink, purple, red, blue. Yes, I see. We are all listing these bright colors. I also noticed this painting behind her on the wall. I'm picturing maybe a darker color there, maybe like a dark red or dark blue. But certainly she was so well known for her use of bright colors in her artwork. And here we can see a few examples of her paintings, and they are so fun and playful. And I think I'm from the Postal Museum. I think her art would be perfect for a set of postage stamps. And I hope one day that will happen, that we'll see a series of her paintings on postage stamps. But for now, we can find one painting of hers that is part of a stamp series. This set of stamps is called To Form a More Perfect Union. and it includes artwork by 10 different artists that show important events that happened during the civil rights era, including this one by Alma Thomas. Sadly, the United States has a stretch of its history when many of the laws were very unfair for Black people. The civil rights era was a time during the 1950s and 60s when many people were pushing to get those unjust laws changed so that all citizens in the United States would have the same rights, no matter what they looked like or what their background was. And Alma Thomas lived during this time. And we learned in the book Ablaze with Color that she faced many injustices during her life because of her skin color, especially about the schools she could go to. She believed very strongly in the rights of Black people to go to the same schools and have the same opportunities as everyone else. So she proudly participated in a famous event called the March on Washington in 1963. She was 71 years old and she marched with hundreds of thousands of other people to stand up for equal rights for all. She heard Martin Luther King Jr. speak in Washington, D.C. on that day, and she felt inspired to put the event into this painting called March on Washington. So let's take a closer look. I'd like to know, what details do you notice? Go ahead and put into the chat some of the things that you see in this painting. This painting is in a very different style from so many that Alma Thomas made, but it shows us an important part of her life and her history. And I see we've got some input coming in the chat. We see people and they're very blurry, which is sort of more indicative of Alma Thomas's style. She's painted in an abstract way, meaning that things didn't look exactly as we see them in real life, but they represent things that we are familiar with. Amy notices we see people with different skin color. Yeah, that's really important because it was people of all different backgrounds and racial identities coming together to support this cause for equal rights. We see people holding signs. That was a very important part of this March on Washington, is making that message very loud and clear for the society to hear and understand. Let's see what else. Lots of people holding signs, lots of blue color. Yeah, I definitely noticed that the blue is very much the sort of color theme of this painting. And something else that I notice is you can really tell that it's a crowd of people. This would just be a tiny section of the march, but you can tell based on how the people are all standing so close together and all those signs in the background that this was a huge event that, as I said before, hundreds of thousands of people attended. Callie's commenting that we don't see any faces. Yeah, that's right. She didn't put those details in, but you do get the sense of this this was a very momentous or important occasion that she participated in. And again, she didn't usually paint people, but this was one she just felt very inspired by this event to do that. So, and it was it's also very important that this artwork got put onto a stamp, because having her artwork on a postage stamp helps share her art and her story with so many others. When these stamps first came out, the United States Postal Service printed 70 million copies of them. So this small stamp with this big message of the importance of equality has traveled all over the country and the world on letters and packages. So I think Alma Thomas would be so proud to have her painting used in this way to help make a better world. So now I'm going to hand it over to Annie to talk to us a little bit more about some of her paintings.
Thanks, Maureen. Let's look closely together at one of Alma's paintings. Take a quiet moment to look closely and choose one line of color to focus on. What color did you find? Answer in the chat. I'm looking and I see lots of different colors. In the middle, I notice a cool stripe of green. What shapes do you see in the line of color that you chose? I notice in my line that the shapes aren't perfect like a square. They look irregular. Ooh, we see some yellow and blue, some dark and pink. Feel free to share some of the shapes that you see as well. Thank you, everyone. These shapes look a little irregular, and they're a special kind of shape called organic shapes. These are natural or imperfect shapes like a stone or a leaf. How many places can you find the color that you chose in the artwork? I see 3 big stripes of green. And if you want, you can repeat this exercise with another color in the artwork. Look, do you notice any patterns? You might have noticed brushstrokes in bright shades of red, orange, green. Ooh, I see an observation in the chat that it looks a little bit like a rug. We notice there are lots of patterns going on, almost a mosaic-like effect. This artwork is called Earth Sermon, Beauty, Love, and Peace. A sermon is an inspirational speech, often given in a place of worship, like a church. Talk together. What do you think about the artwork's title and the idea of an earth sermon on the topics of beauty, love, and peace? If you could make a painted sermon, what would yours be about? I think if I were going to make a painted sermon right now, it would be about spring and how the whole world is waking up from what feels like a long nap. It's so joyful right now. At first glance, Alma Thomas's paintings may seem irregular, but when you look more closely, you notice how her patterns and shapes are irregular and complex. In other words, the size, the shape, and the spacing between her shapes varies. She used to plan her paintings by sketching the shapes in pencil on her canvas first, and she would think very carefully about each shape. The pencil lines are still visible on some of her canvases. Alma never erased them. In many of her paintings, it's the imperfection in the pattern, a larger break between shapes, or in between shapes in a line that creates a draw for the eye. The spacing creates a mosaic-like effect, or like one of our participants mentioned, almost like a rug. Alma Thomas once said, "A world without color would seem dead. Color for me is life." Thomas was an expert at color theory. That's the science and art of mixing colors. Have you ever noticed the way you pair colors can create different emotions and feelings? When Thomas planned her paintings, she created smaller canvases to experiment with her color choices. She would pin smaller pieces of paper to her canvas for reference and keep planning along. Sometimes she even stapled multiple pieces of paper together as a planning tool for her large paintings. We're going to go to the next slide so that we can look at a few of her other paintings and start gathering our materials. I see one question in the chat before I mention our materials. Oh, we'll begin drawing together in just one moment. If you need to grab your materials, we're going to get ready with our construction paper, glue, and if you're interested, cardboard or cardstock to glue down your Alma Thomas inspired mosaic. We have one last slide while I get my hand cam ready for our craft, and Maureen's going to talk about a few other paintings that are in the Smithsonian collection from Alma's work.
Yeah, so while Annie is getting her hand cam ready, I would love to know what inspires you when you do your artwork. What are you thinking about today to inspire you? You can see on the slide here, we have paintings by Alma Thomas named Skylight, Autumn Leaves Fluttering in the Breeze, and Spring, Delightful Flower Bed. And then there's even one that was, it's called Red Azaleas Singing and Dancing Rock and Roll Music. So she was inspired by the azaleas and also by music. So I'm wondering, what's inspiring everyone here today? Someone saying stress. Yeah, I think we can all relate to that. But these paintings are calming to look at. I agree with that. Yeah, and I know nature is a huge inspiration for many artists, and especially this time of year in spring. And around here in the DC area, we are lucky that we have the cherry blossoms getting ready to bloom. They're so beautiful. Alex Nander asking, what art supplies do we need? I will just quickly go back to the slide that shows the materials. We'll leave that up for a second, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Annie, looks like you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Maureen. So Alex and Andrew and anyone else who's wondering, we'll need some various colors of paper for our activity today. If you'd like, you can have a background piece of paper to glue your torn paper to once we get started tearing, or you can just get started with your pieces of paper. If there's a color of paper that you'd like to use that you don't have, you can always color it in with marker or paint it afterward to really bring your artwork to life. So if we're ready to stop screen sharing, we can get our hand cam up and get started crafting, everyone. Today, we're going to be making a torn paper collage inspired by Alma Thomas's transformative art making style. We're going to get started by tearing our paper. I'm going to start by tearing some stripes in a similar style to Alma and see what kind of arrangements I can make with my paper. So get started. You can experiment with the sizes and shapes that you're going to create. You can see I have one big piece here, and then I'm going to tear up some smaller, almost rectangular-like shapes in my purple as well. If you'd like to share what you're tearing in the chat or what colors you're working with, please feel free. I'm excited to hear what everyone's working on. So I've got some purple. Let's see, I've also got pink, blue, and green paper. I think I'm going to get started with some green. As you tear, you can start to think about what is inspiring you and what kind of composition you want to make today. What do you want your collage to be about? I'm feeling really excited by spring and the sun outside. I even have some special kind of shimmery golden paper. So I think I'm going to be inspired by the sun today and make a sort of circular artwork. So once you have some torn paper, keep going until you have each color you like. I'm going to get some pink and then I'll get started arranging my paper into the shape that I think I want to try out for my artwork. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll make sure that we're all having a great art making experience. Okay, so here is my background sheet. And I'm going to get started with loose pieces of paper, no glue yet. I'm just going to experiment and see what style I like. Alma did lots of stripe-like compositions in her work, as you saw with the artwork we looked at earlier. She also made many artworks that had a circular-like pattern. You can see what feels right for your work. I'm going to start with a stripe pattern and see how that feels. I'm going with a double green because I've been feeling really excited by all of the crunchy grass I feel under my feet that's been growing now that winter's over. Just like Alma, I'm trying to make sure I have different amounts of space between my shapes. You can see they're all a little bit different. Kind of want a long shape here. And just keep adding and playing around with your shapes. So there's one possibility. I'm going to add a little gold for my sun inspiration. Once you've tried out one composition, go ahead and try out another. If you think that your first composition is the one that you like best, you might take a photo so you can remember and recreate it later. So let's get started all over again. This time I'm going to try and make a circular pattern, and I'm going to start with my beautiful gold paper. Let's get some pink around that. Actually, maybe a green would look better. Feel free to try out a few different styles and patterns and see what feels right for you. I'm going to do sort of a little triangle, and then let's see. Get some pink around that. This feels nice and joyful. and bright, just like spring to me. Any questions so far? I'm glad that everyone's having fun. This is a pretty simple, exciting craft. So here's my composition too. I think I'm gonna go back to my stripes. I liked that one best. And now that I've tried out a few different things, I'm ready to grab my glue and start collaging to my background. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of glue to my piece of paper and think about where I'd like to place it to get started on my final artwork. Gonna start out with this bright pink. It's just so exciting to me. What colors are you working with? I haven't pulled out my blue yet, but I might add some later. And you might notice some of your pieces might be a little bit big. They might come off the edge. Maybe you want that, or maybe you want to tear a piece to make it smaller and fit it into your stripe. One row complete. I'm trying to decide, do I like green or purple next? I think I'm gonna go with purple and then maybe green after that. It's always good to think about your color combinations, just like Alma did with her color theory. I like the way these shapes kind of curve together on one side. But I think I want this piece to be a little off, sort of to the side, diagonally. Keep adding. I'm gonna make one more stripe and then check in and see if anyone has any questions before we finish up our program. I think I'll do something a little bit different from Alma in my last stripe and combine some colors, because it feels to me like spring is a time where everything starts coming together, blossoming and growing into each other. You can have all sorts of different combinations. Do what feels best for your artistic style. One more piece, a little bit long. Let's see. There we go. So this is the start of my artwork. You can see that glue needs a little time to dry. And I think on this side, I'll add some green and some more gold to really fill out my composition. I wish I could live in a mosaic too, Nadine. What kind of mosaic would you want to live in? Maybe the one you're making right now. Will you tell us about it? Oh, Nadine made a heart-shaped rainbow like Alma made. Wow, I would love to see a picture of that.
Thank you so much, Annie. That was a lot of fun watching that artistic process and how fun you could just sweep the pieces of paper aside and start over with a blank slate and experiment before gluing things down. That was very cool. And it really did remind me so much of the art that Alma Thomas made. And I know we are very lucky at the Smithsonian to have so many of her works in our collections. And I know the Hirshhorn is going to be displaying some this summer. Isn't that right?
Yes, and we have a new exhibit that's opening in July. Fingers crossed it doesn't get pushed back, and we'll have 2 Alma Thomas paintings up on the wall. I'm really hoping to get Jean's book so we can read it in the museum too. I'm very excited.
Yes, excellent. So yeah, well, thank you so much to everyone. We really hope that you enjoyed this Alma Thomas program. Thank you again to Annie for that leading that craft, and to Jean for sharing all that you did with us, both of you, your knowledge and creativity is wonderful. Thank you to April, our American Sign Language interpreter. And thank you to our audience for joining us. Just as a reminder, we will be sending out a follow-up email with all of those links that we've posted in the chat for you to take a look at when you have time. And we will also have a very brief survey that will appear on screen as the program ends. We would greatly appreciate you taking a few minutes to fill that out and give us your feedback. Thank you, and we hope you'll join us for future programs. Have a wonderful day.